This is Carl Tepper sitting in for Chad Hasty on the Chad Hasty Show. As promised, I have the illustrious state senator sporting a rough look.
It comes off next week.
Are you going to clean that up? State Senator Charles Perry is wearing
white beard.
Yeah, he's got a little beard going on, and I'm trying to decide. I'm pretty sure I want you to shave it.
Yeah, I think my wife would agree with you.
Yeah, so it's good to let
you had 2 weeks that you don't have to be anywhere or see anybody or go nowhere. So you just that's what wild and crazy CPAs
Look at you. Good for you.
So,
you're actually running the business this week? Is that what you've been doing?
I'm trying to get ready for year-end tax planning and then get ready for some early legislation. We've got some big stuff that's going to hit early, so just trying to finishing up those deals. Lots of money stuff to be decided. So, how
many committees are you on?
Served on 12 during the interim. Now, realistically, about 8 of them were real substantive with really, really mean.
Is that normal?
No.
How many committees do most state senators sit?
I would venture out and say that most of them have around 5 to maybe 7.
All right.
So it was a heavy interim. My session never stopped.
All right, let's get to it. I remember you had spoken to the Republican Party had a Christmas party executive committee meeting under Chairman Steve Evans. And you got up and spoke about what's coming on the legislative session, but you were agitated. I have to admit, I haven't read any articles on this, but you seemed a little agitated about, and there's some rumors going around, the state Senate is leaving disabled children on the side of the road with not even with a lump of coal. What's going on?
Well, the state Senate, let me rephrase it. Let's clarify. Number one, 181 members. I think there were probably 175 that voted for a budget last session. There was very few detractors from the overall budget. In that budget, there was a rider put in that removed effectively $150 million state Medicaid dollars out of therapy rates. Now, this has been an ongoing issue since 2011. This is how far this discussion goes back.
So let me therapy. What type of therapy?
It's occupational. It's life skills. It's speech therapy. It's all of the things you would envision.
So there might actually be a lot of children who get their speech therapy and that sort of thing, and there's some help for them in the Medicaid.
And it's health issues. It's medical therapy type stuff. It's not what you would envision in a speech therapist where you'd go out and someone that stutters a little bit, you'd work with them. This is speech therapy so you can swallow. I mean, this is medical related therapy.
And so why was that? Why was that rider put in there to take the money away?
It came up in 2013, and you had 2 competing therapist groups, and one was getting a 4-to-1 reimbursement compared to national average. One was getting a lot lower than that, and the one that got a lot lower than that came entitled on the other one, effectively thinking that they would be moved up to 4 times the national and pulled down. So all that to say is the background for where it came in. So ultimately what happened was these cuts were approved. In a conference hearing, which is insider baseball, you do the budget, it goes to conference, which means House and Senate confer, 10 people around a table, and they start negotiating through the budget process. In that process, this rider was put on to say, let's go forward with the cuts we talked about for the last 6 years. In that, there was this threat by those associations that if that were to happen, then publicly we would be chastised for it. Now, let's clarify. Nobody wants any kids, especially in rural Texas, because that's where the challenge is. The geography alone of meeting the needs of these kids is big. So nobody wants those kids to go without. I've spoke with a therapist just yesterday in my office and asked her point blank, where are we at in that? And he said, we're not going to see any drastic reductions in access to care, nor are we going to see any drastic reductions in the ability to provide that care. So That confirmed some of the stuff that was going on. That said, there are some gaps, I think, that we've been exposed to over this last 6 months to a year.
Were they inadvertent gaps?
Yeah, absolutely. We do $210 billion budget. We have effectively about 90 days. You're 140 days down there, but realistically, you work on that.
So when do these gaps trigger?
The gaps were triggered. The cuts are effectively 12-1. So you're going to start seeing possibly some of that, but let's qualify. There are agencies that are federal and state funded that do a really, really good job. There are some private sectors that do a really good job. It was the private sector that was getting exorbitant rates over and above. And you look at the urban guy, the urban therapist where they come to you, the urban therapist where you go to them is a 15-minute trip. You take a rural West Texas therapist, they may have 4 hours. And you may have a child that needs 3 types of therapy that you can't cross-train the therapist, nor can you provide all 3 in the same day so they could, quote, carpool, the logic, because the child can't go through that much of
So
an
if you're in
intensive-
Haskell, Texas, need to see a therapist in Lubbock, some of these families might carpool.
Yeah. So there was and these are kids that literally physically are so fragile they may not be able to leave their place. Plus, there's also cross-training. One of the private sectors I've spoke to, they don't cross-train the parent to provide the care, so to speak. If your child needs therapists for like knee surgery, they show you exercises when they send you home. That goes on from the quasi-state and government therapists. They do those cross-trainings to try to get that parent in rural West Texas cranked up. So all that to say is legislature probably does need to go back and will, I have all the faith and confidence in the world, and address the rate disparities for those that have geographical rural issues that need to be dealt with differently apart from the guys that were truly taking advantage of the taxpayers. And so it's that balance, $210 billion budget, 28 million people, and you got to consider all concerns and interests. And I don't think there's any one legislature that I can name right off the bat that would say it's a good thing that if we cut therapy off to kids that need it. That's just not what we do. If it's been an unintended consequence, we're going to correct it. Those cuts cut in on 12/1. We go back January 10th. So there's a 30-day window here where some small repercussions may be felt. But I think that'll be at a top-of-the-line item budget coming in through supplemental budget, which is where you fix things from the prior session that need to be addressed. Your first vote is supplemental budget.
Is that something that would normally be done in a special session, but y'all are going into session anyway, so you're kind of handling it? Or?
Yeah, it would. If we weren't going back in January, I think that's risen to the level of concern that at least it would be studied and make sure that there are not gaps that need to be, and we would have found the funding, no different than what CPS has had some relief on.
So there are people screaming about this. Do they have a genuine screaming, or is some of it opportunism?
It's opportunism, and I can tell you in confidence that some of the rhetoric. One was a Democratic strategist or the new Democrat chair, and I respect their rights to do what they do.
That's their job, is to make you look bad.
Try to make you look bad. But then there's some supposed colleagues, so to speak, that seem to have a disdain for some of the local representation in this area, and they saw that as a caveat. Unfortunately, here's who loses in that. It's the parent of that child. You raise a level of angst and anxiety on a parent that has more on their plate than they should have to deal with today. So to put, it's kind of our irony of the day. If you pay any attention to some of the rhetoric, they're doing the very thing that they're accusing the legislature to do on social issue stuff. They're pandering to the politics of it, and unfortunately, this puts those parents of those kids in those crosshairs. So we're going to fix it. Whatever needs to be dealt with. It's only fair to say let's talk about the entire picture and the background of where this has come from. Medicaid is $70 billion of our state budget. That's up from $61 billion when we left last session. So exponential growth. We have to find a way to fix it. We believe the current administration was not favorable to actually dealing with the issues. But the new one coming in is a states' rights guy, so to speak. That's what he says. States get better control over those Medicaid dollars. We can deliver better care more efficiently and more effectively than we're able to do under the current federal regime.
Has anyone written a best practices for this new administration coming in? I guess it would go towards Health and Human Services, or who controls Medicaid, Medicare? Health and Human Services, isn't that correct?
Well, our Texas Health and Human Service budget works with what CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and CMS is the great all-encompassing rules determining for the Health and Human Services at the federal level
in Washington,
in D.C. So we work directly with both of those sides of the equation, but the rules, if you will, that are determined, it's kind of like laws made, Health and Human Services is supposed to go implement. CMS comes up with the rules to make it go into action. But we have got great discussion. I tell people it's kind of like we've got the racehorse at the gate for the last 8 years. we've been sitting behind the gate, waiting the gate to turn loose so that we can turn these ideas loose and see which ones make sense and implement them. Medicaid's number one on that list. There are so many good ideas. I've been communicating with several folks out of the D.C. area over the last 2 years of things that we can try and do, and they're all coming to fruition. And shortly thereafter his inauguration, I think you're going to see a plethora of free market / state rights / more control, more tightening of those people that are in the system that truly legitimately shouldn't be in the system, so that we can use it for the money that, these kids that need the therapy. So a whole lot of things are going to happen really quickly as far as ideas going out. Then it'll go through the proper legislation vetting process.
Not to get too into ideology. This was the original intent of the founding fathers, to have 50 little petri dishes of experimentation, of finding best practices and ways of tweaking, and also the different values of each state seem to come in. So,
and what an exciting time! I mean, it's been a battle for 8 years, a coercion federal partner rather than a progressive partner moving forward.
I was a fan of the guy, but I'm also still cautiously optimistic, because we just hope they can overcome, and they have the willingness to overcome the federal bureaucracy on these issues and find a way to refunnel the money. Of course, you have to deal with the Congress as well, to refunnel the money back to the states so they can do their job and have that experimentation on these issues.
If there's anything I've learned, local delivery of service is the best and most effective and efficient way to do it. So the more local the dollar, the better the service outcome.
State Senator Charles Perry with Carl Tepper on the Chad Hasty Show. We will get into some transportation issues at the backside of this break. Carl Tepper and State Senator Charles Perry sitting in for Chad Hasty. Just to be clear out there, some of it was not quite intentional, and some of it was there was some abuse of the system happening. Senator Perry's too nice to say these things on the air, so I'll say it. There was some abuse happening with the system where, some of these vendors were charging outrageous amounts to not really do the job. They were throwing pizza out to a bunch of kids, not really doing any therapy. And then when, the state has to have some constraints on its budget somewhere. We can't just keep giving the free money out to everyone. So they're trying to come up with ways to save the taxpayers money on an exponentially growing problem of Medicaid, Medicare. So, everyone needs to pay attention. When somebody writes an article on these things, they might want to call State Senator Perry. He's one of these weird guys. He actually picks up his phone, or my wife will answer sometimes and get you in touch with him. And I don't know you ever to have denied an interview. So, I would just go ahead and call the state senator and maybe get the other side of the story before articles are written and there's a lot of hard feelings. You might want to get the truth out of it. All right. Let's talk about some transportation issues, which has always been kind of my interest. I sat on Austin's Transportation Commission for years and watched them do stupid things for years, And so there was a long list. It's Texas Tribune story. They know how to pick up a good story sometimes, and these are the transportation. I know this isn't your biggest thing, transportation, but these are the transportation issues coming along at the legislature. One of which it really isn't a problem out here in West Texas, but Uber and Lyft were kind of banned in Austin. Austin's trying to put a bunch of regulations on them because the taxi cab companies feel like they have to be on the same footing as a new technology, and they're not going to be. So you can't get an Uber in one of the most high-tech towns in America. And so now, is the state going to intervene in this somehow, do you think?
Yeah, there's already bills filed. Actually, I had the bill last session, and Chairman of Transportation wanted it, and I said,
Who is that? Who's chair of Transportation?
Chairman Nichols.
Okay.
Been transportation guru forever. He is really, really knowledgeable on this stuff and good guy. And when a chairman asks a freshman for a bill, you just pass it on over. So, but it didn't go anywhere. Couldn't get Uber and them together. I want to plug my city council here in Lubbock. They came up with a really responsible city ordinance for Uber to do business in city of Lubbock. And, sometimes we don't give credit where credit's due, but they worked through it. They worked with the stakeholder groups and fixed that. Austin is contrary to that. So what you're going to see, and here's the heart of this issue, set Uber aside.
Who led that? Karen Gibson led that effort?
Yeah, I believe she did. I think it was her statute. In fact,
good
she's got a little tweak, but she did a good job with that. She didn't say no. Didn't say we're going to protect this interest group. We're going to try to make this right. And Lubbock's got a great program, one that's being modeled, I think, around something, one that Travis County could learn from. But here's the deal. The center principle of this is when do city ordinances become statewide issues? And so the debate in this is going to be, did the city of Austin overstretch and create a situation where it's counter to commerce, counter to business, counter to, understand the local control aspect interjects into here if the community says no. But we had this come up the previous session, fracking. We had a city that was trying to basically outlaw fracking. You can't outlaw an industry that is arguably the largest part of our budget driver in the state of Texas.
I think, Charles, I would argue that fracking has a greater, we need oil.
Sure.
It was very important, especially at the time we were facing very high oil prices, and this is, a greater national need.
Sure.
Whereas Uber,
I think that's where you're going to hear the argument.
Austin voted pretty overwhelmingly against Uber,
right,
which I think is weird and crazy, but that's Austin, and I guess they have a right to be.
And that is going to be the principle of this debate. If you set Uber aside, it's going to come down to, where does state feel like city ordinances are overreaching and overstretching, and where do city ordinances stop and begin? And that is going to be a continuation of what we see as a proliferation across the state on so many of those sanctuary cities. Is going to tie into that discussion. Is there a state overreach? Well, I think that immigration's federal. We have immigration laws, and cities choose not to enforce those. That is a problem. So I think that the core of the Uber debate is going to be, is it a precedent setting for a statewide initiative, or does it do statewide agenda or ideas or philosophies? Does it interject into the statewide? I don't know that you get there. I don't know that you don't get there. But that's going to be the core of that Uber debate is where does cities and states stop?
One of these, I'm going to skip number 2. Number 3 is disdain for toll roads. I was real into this in Austin for years. Disdain for toll roads continue, but there won't be enough to get rid of them. The operators of a 41-mile toll stretch of State Highway 130 filed for bankruptcy. I didn't know that.
Maybe recently.
After lower than expected traffic spurred shortfalls in revenue. Actually, I think that's 130. It goes all the way down to Seguin, actually. And so the Texas Department of Transportation calculated that it would cost $36.7 billion to pay off construction debt on the state's network of toll roads, drawing the ire of state lawmakers. Meanwhile, Dallas Mayor Mike Rawlings asked that TxDOT complete a comprehensive analysis of what would happen to downtown traffic if the city built the controversial Trinity Park toll road. And then there's some comments about Donald Trump and what that's going to do to infrastructure, and will that mean more toll roads?
Sure.
I had problem with toll roads in that it separated the city, the communities within the city. One guy's going to get a free road on the south side of Austin. The other guy's going to get a toll road on the north side of Austin. I would have rather seen, and people get real mad at me on this, a local option gas tax for the entire community, so that the entire community gets some of the good with the bad. But nevertheless, toll roads won. It's also hard to argue with success because it does seem to be working in Austin, where I get around a lot quicker, and I've got my little toll tag. And as much as I hated the concept, it seems to work.
Well, here's what I see. I think, number one, I think toll roads are popularity has been on attack for years. It's being phased out. Every law that we've made regarding transportation funding, including the $5 billion we put into transportation that's going to start in 2018, basically, that was specific. No money can go towards toll roads. Most people don't realize a lot of these toll roads are actually private owned, and they turn the road back after
Spanish companies.
Companies. So it's really kind of a win-win from a state perspective. As a principle goes, we're asking our fellow Texans to pay twice. That's the problem with this is a toll road. I don't think you should pay taxes, sales taxes, all the taxes you pay into the state coffers, and then turn around and have to re-up for something that's a core structure.
We're going to talk a little bit more about transportation the backside of this break. This is Carl Tepper and State Senator Charles Perry sitting in for Chad Hasty. Carl Tepper and State Senator Charles Perry sitting in for Chad Hasty. And we're talking about some transportation issues in Texas. Last transportation issue. One other thing, the toll roads. Austin has, I think it's opened up or about to.
The road to nowhere?
No, stop
the other one?
No, stop. It was the high peak the peak use toll roads, which were theoretical. When I sat on their transportation commission, University of Texas professors came in and presented to us that at rush hour, when you're trying to get downtown at 8 a.m. in Austin, we're going to have an extra lane. We have room for extra lanes on Mopac, and it might be $20. You know, it's a peak demand rate. So as more traffic is backed up, it'll cost you a little more to use that. How much do you really want to use that toll road? But it really was an option. You can sit in traffic on Mopac. Maybe there's an accident, and you're happy to pay the $20, which for a guy like me is worth every penny. Until I get my bill at the end of the month, I guess. But in the middle of the night, it might be free or it might be 50 cents. Just whatever gets you downtown quicker, whatever you decide to do. Is that stuff that state? It seems like it's going to work. Let's see what happens. It seems to me like it'll work, and it really is a free choice type of thing, what you want to do or how you want to get downtown. Those of you in Lubbock who don't understand what the heck I'm talking about, they're building extra lanes into these big cities that, again, if it's the peak time of day, you pay, it might be $20. It might be $5, it might be $8, depending on the amount of traffic backed up. Somehow the computer makes a call on how much it's going to be. And the other lanes that were already originally there are still free. Is the state involved in that at all? Are they going to fund any of that, or what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's a state highway, all of those discussions, interactions, and policies like that, do we do a high occupancy? Do we have a peak lane? All of those are discussions that originate out of the transportation department, as long as it's a state jurisdiction. My big world here is I got to get road for right-of-way acquisition on Woodrow.
Yeah.
And road, hopefully some right-of-way acquisition opportunities for Loop 88.
Because you're trying to do an outer loop.
Yeah, we're doing an outer loop. So all of those issues that the urbans, thank goodness out here, Lubbock's forward-thinking enough. They build roads before you actually have to have them. And that's not what these big urban cities have done. They've let the right-of-ways be gobbled up by commercial enterprises, which drives the cost up beyond comprehension. Last number I heard, $300 and some odd billion of road highway infrastructure that would need to be done today if the funding was available. So it's just one of those deals you kind of catch as catch can, patch and fix. I would say that we went down the road of the HOV lane thinking that was going to be the catch-all and the save-all. It's not used. It's just not used. So you got a 8-lane highway, and 6 of them are used, and 2 of them are cut off of access. So we can be smarter about our transportation. Also, just I can tell you, being in Austin, 35 is probably the worst one in the whole state, and it's concentrated right there in Austin. But if you change 15 minutes in your schedule, you go in a little earlier or a little later, come home a little earlier or a little later, whichever it is, you probably minimize the downtime on the highway by as much as 50%.
Yeah, trouble is, I promise you, it's not 15 minutes. It's an hour.
Austin's
one way
the worst. Austin, I'm going to tell you, Austin is my worst experience. I'm in Houston, I'm in Dallas, I'm in those big metropolitan areas, and I have to say, bar none, 35 in Austin. But that's a philosophical.
That was their fault.
That's their perspective from a council level out.
Yeah, to those of you,
30 years.
To you younger guys out there, Austin was very environmental. They didn't want people to move there to the hill country, so they thought, if I don't build roads, it'll make them not want to develop out there. If I don't build the infrastructure, they won't develop. Well, they developed anyway, and now they're just choking.
And even to the point of they're having discussion whether they want to tear down part of 35 because it's a cutoff from the disadvantaged community versus the economically affluent community, and they're wanting to actually destroy that and put a park where it's at. So, I mean, just lots of different.
They're nutty.
Issues.
I will say these highways do act as barriers from one side of town to the other, like 75 in Dallas, from one side to the other. But 75 was actually done a little better. It was subterranean. They went below grade, and it makes it a little nicer.
A little better, and that's kind of what the discussion. But let me just kind of, again, I'll go back to the city of Lubbock. We're building roads before we actually need them. And that issue with respect to community planning, what it looks like, where it's going forward, is all a consideration on the front end, on a proactive perspective, versus a retroactive knee-jerk reaction that you see the big cities like Austin in.
I have had, let me see if I get to this article and find it. Nope, that's not it. There is, here it is. Texas judge who questions death penalty won't seek re-election. Court of Criminal Appeals Judge Elsa Arcala, a Republican, said the main reason she won't run is because of the random, unreliable results of the partisan judicial elections. We've had this argument for years. By the way, I'm happy electing my judges. I think the ones who know that they're not quite holding the water of our, community values are going to get defeated. So I don't know why they cry about this all the time, but she thinks she would be vulnerable in part because of the death penalty. I will tell you, and I'm probably going to get killed for this, but look, if a cop killer ends up meeting the needle or the hangman's noose or something, I've got no problem with that. The problem I've had with the death penalty is I always thought it was being used for particularly vicious crimes and with a really great abundance of evidence. It's pretty unquestionable. And it turns out, Senator, that it seems that there are people with life sentences or with death penalties that there really is a lot of question about whether they had done it or not. I think the appeals process seems to be able to peel some of these off over time. But I've had some problems with the death penalty. It seems very expensive. I believe in justice. I don't think it deters crime, but I do believe in justice, and I think at times it is certainly justice that some of these people need to go. But I don't take that lightly, and it seems sometimes that justice is, costing us a lot of money.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And so for anybody out there, just go ahead and get your campaign mailer ready. But the fiscal side of the death penalty makes no logical sense whatsoever. If you're convicted with a death penalty sentence, you're immediately appealed, and I'm all for that. I will tell you, having served in criminal justice, having served on corrections, it is very clear to me that, unfortunately, as good a judicial system and justice system as we have, and it's the best in the world, it a lot of times comes down to how passionate your attorney is and how well he studied on your areas. Now, DNA has really a game changer. I think there's a lot of questions answered today quicker and better with certainty that were not done even 10 years ago. So I think that when you do assess the death penalty, you need to have the appeals process, but it's going on for 20 years, and the cost of those appeals is the state taxpayers' dollars. So if you're asking me today, I could see a day where death penalty could go away and not give me any real heartburn, as long as you substitute it with a life without parole. And I mean that in all earnest. You get out of jail free. You never get to leave. And I think that's almost more punishment in some respects, because you don't get the martyrdom aspect, you don't get the publicity aspect, and you sit in a 4x4 cell or smaller every day and think about the consequences. So I'm not to a point where the death penalty is a deal breaker for me. But today, the way it's administered makes no sense from a financial perspective, and I think from a cruelty perspective, I think from a logical perspective, and I also think, and it's just a statement that's going to get me in a lot of trouble, that we probably have executed an innocent person or two over the last 100 years.
That really bothers me. Is there a way,
does bother me.
Instead of using the appeals process to kind of peel off and find justice, is there not a way to fix it on the front end? If it's a capital murder case, is there not a way to maybe rate the attorneys better to get these guys?
Well, we do that. And again, Lubbock, Texas, I got to tell you, Jack Strawfragan was instrumental in coming up with the regional defenders unit effectively, which said Tahoka doesn't have any of the attorneys that are qualified to try a capital punishment case, nor does Tahoka budget supports $1 million attorney bill to defend one of these. So years and years ago, and it's been something that the state has benefited from and taken examples from and are trying to duplicate. Regionally, being a small rural area that we serve, they had to have some expertise that didn't exist. Prior to that, you were at the mercy of the public defender, basically, because who wants to take one of those on? I mean, it's just expensive and long, and you tie your world up for 20 years, and someone's life's in the balance. So we have done that, but let me tell you, when Matt Powell says, I don't think this one warrants it, even though it could, he's weighing all those issues. Do you want to lock this person up for life with no parole, or do you want to keep them in a court system for 30 years, 20 years? So death penalty in my book is not one of those mainstay red meat soap primary Republican kind of issues that we shouldn't revisit and have an honest discussion. Does it make sense?
Or you can possibly change the guidelines that would warrant the capital murder.
I think anytime you're a public official like a police officer, you don't want to ever lose that option. But if it's on the other stuff, then you really got to kind of visit about it.
Carl Tepper and State Senator Charles Perry, and this is Chad Hasty Show. Senator, your sanctuary cities bill, I had a long thing about California's giving everybody driver's licenses out there, but your sanctuary cities bill, I don't know if places like Austin or Dallas proper get a lot of state funds, but are you guys serious? You're going to really strip any state funding away from these
Any
cities?
discretionary state spending will be stripped from it, no different than the feds have already made that statement. And actually, it's been approved by rule that they're going to do that. So you take a San Francisco that I'm told is $1 billion of federal discretionary grant funding that could be cut off to that city or that municipal.
What is that discretionary grant funding? What does that go
A lot
for?
of it's used, ironically, a lot of it's used in law enforcement training. So the very entity that's, quote, being advocated to go out and create a sanctuary city policy, implicit or implied by the council or the commissioners, whoever's told them to go do it, is getting funding for basically upholding the administration's law.
Is it continuing education for law enforcement?
It's continuous. It's certifications. It's law enforcement training. SPAG here is a cog for a lot of those dollars that flow through. So it's kind of an irony in it, but it's it goes back to we spend $800 million on border security in this state. Why would we let cities and jurisdictions inside the border undermine federal immigration law?
Is a lot of it also transportation spending?
Not probably as much. Now let's qualify. If it's entitlement, you can't touch it if it's a Medicaid dollar.
Okay.
If it's tied to tax revenues such as gas tax, you can't touch those because those are not discretionary spendings. This is where a state would say, we're going to give $1 million to all law enforcement across the deal to buy body cams. Mm-hmm. Or we're going to give $1 million to whatever purpose.
They won't get
it's a discretion. That funding will be cut off.
What about what you know of the Fed, federal transportation funding? Would that be stopped?
Again,
I think
if you're tied to a revenue taxation of that person, then that states are
okay. So if they pay a gas tax, that's where it comes from.
But there's a lot of federal discretionary grants that come to states. Okay. Don't kid yourself. There's a lot of money in the system. Universities are getting discretionary federal spending. And universities get state discretionary grants. So if you're a university that so chooses to go down that road, you would have those funds removed.
Any other, real quickly, any other big battles shaping up? Of course, it looks like we have a dead veterinary school here.
Oh,
Any movement on that?
I wouldn't count that one out just yet.
Okay, he's talking
smack. We're going to have some
ladies.
big discussion.
I got the hope Rob Slider and Jody got that. The state senator is talking smack here. We'll see what happens. I would like to see. I think it's time for
that's
the state
a legislative matter, and politics, if it's within our purview, are not going to be the determining factor. That needs to be decided at the legislative level. In
short, ladies and gentlemen, Texas A&M is playing hardball out here, and that's okay. And we can push back a little bit if you're a Red Raider fan, and we'll see if UT
has nothing to do with universities.
Oh, come on!
This has everything to do with what's the better good served by the public, and this is a public policy that has severe consequences if it's not been implemented. And so we're going to have some really heartfelt, honest discussions with those that played politics.
Any other issues hitting the forefront?
Tons of them. I mean, we got property tax reforms. We've got CPS, foster care.
Property tax. I forgot that.
CPS, foster care, and adoptive foster to adopt. That system's going to have tremendous overhaul to the good, for the positive. But the property tax is going to take a front and center stage. We've got hopefully a barrel price that's stabilized. That's really all we need. We don't have to have a $100 barrel. Mm-hmm. We just need stability. It's hard to budget when you go from 30 to 60, 50 to 40 and back. We're trending up and we're stable. And if we can do that, our budget estimate, we get early January, we get another bite at that estimate come May. So from January to May, with the Trump 100 days out of the way and seeing where he's truly going from an energy policy, from a homeland security policy, from an immigration policy, our Texas budget's going to be pretty fluid up until May, coming out of the session, to the benefit of the taxpayers.
Go back to real quickly property taxes. You're going to look at it from the appraisal side or the rate side, or what are we?
It's all getting kicked around. There's a current bill filed that you go from 8% rollback to 4% and force an election to the voters to go above the 4% effective. The ARB process, there's people that believe, or the perception is that it's not independent, and they want to see some independence done in that. We got to move slowly. We don't want to go back to independent jurisdictions doing appraisals. That doesn't work. We don't want to go back to, I don't know that you get to an elected official in that capacity that's even more not politically challenged. I mean,
yeah.
But I do think you have some better opportunity if you put consumer interaction into those panels that do that rather than just the jurisdictions they're appraising for. So we're going to have those discussions, but the rollback election is at the heart of this debate. Do we go from an 8 to 4? Do we compromise somewhere in the middle with the House? The House seems to have an appetite to do something. People are very upset. And I really am one that you take the barriers away from the taxpayers to have to go challenge it. I mean, it's one thing to do it. It's another thing to put a barrier in place between you and the taxpayer group to challenge it. So
well, and
we'll see how that goes.
I'm probably considered someone who's more knowledgeable about property and property taxes is my job. And even I'm intimidated when I walk in there and have to go up against these guys who just protest the other way all day long.
The challenge for Senate District 28 is this is an urban agenda again, and one that needs resolution, I think. And out here, we just don't have quite the issues they're raising, but we have different issues.
We used to not, but we're starting to have them.
In the mineral interest, though, when I have districts and county budgets that go hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of values in less than 3 months go away or come back, it's a real challenge because the law reads they pretty much are at the cap before they ever start and nothing changed. They still got the one sheriff, one road grader, so it's a challenge to fit that one-stop shop, fits it all. The other thing that you're going to see is the school voucher, school choice discussion. I don't know where it goes. It gets out of the Senate probably, but we got to tread lightly with that because we get that wrong. We've made some really great opportunities to waste a lot of money.
You know, I know that's been your argument, some of the state representatives, but would it really be that much of a factor? Maybe in Lubbock, but in the rural areas, I just don't see private schools popping up all over the place.
It's not, but you are taking money out of a system that arguably one way or the other, whatever perspective, it may be short on some federal dollars or state dollars to get some of those things met, and you start messing with that balance between state, local, and feds on some of these funding issues. You really create some. So we got to move slowly. I think you'll see some choice initiative out of the Senate for sure. You may see some component of it because I think 2 of the statewide have indicated they're interested in it. It might be a special needs kind of voucher process where kids with special needs are.
I can't believe we needed more time because you're actually pushing sort of a Lubbock model where you need to be allowed to go ahead and transfer within the district.
Senate Bill 272. It looks exactly what we get to do out here, and it works, and it should be implemented statewide.
It works well for Lubbock County and the areas here.
I guarantee you our kids are competitive in this area.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Great
guys.
job. Have a great new year. Everyone out there, we're about to sign off, but I think 2017 is going to be a great year.
I'm so excited.
So God bless you all. You deserve to have a long weekend and enjoy it, and then we're all back to work on Tuesday, right, Jody? Happy New Year, everyone. Bye-bye now.